Good morning. Norwich City are finally in the Championship top 6, but to stay in there until the end of the season, they'll have to navigate 9 tricky games to get there after 46. That's what David Wagner says is the important thing, and of course it starts this weekend with Stoke City away from home. I'm going to give you my tactical preview and predicted 11 for the game on Tactics Board, so without further ado, this is the 11 I think Wagner will trust to win him the game in the Potteries. So I've gone for Angus Gunn in goal, Jack Stacey at right back, Jakob Sorensen and Ben Gibson at centre back, with Sam McCallum at left back, Kenny McLean and Marcelino Nunez in centre of midfield, with Christian Fastnacht on the right, Borja Sainz on the left and Gabriel Sara behind Josh Sargent. Up front, of course, last week I said that Grant Hanley would be injured and Dimitris Sinulis would replace the suspended Borja Sainz, so hopefully there aren't as many late changes as there were last week, but I'm hoping that there won't be because that must be against the law of averages. At the back, I've gone for Angus Gunn, and we all know how important he's been for Norwich City this season. Of course, against Rotherham, he only had one save to make, but his distribution is really important in how Norwich build the play up. You can see from Wagner's centre-back selections how important that is, and although Gunn has been lauded for his shot stopping, and I think everyone has noticed an improvement in how he controls his area this season. I think an area where he maybe gets underrated is the distribution, and although you don't see too many world-class passes from him in the style of sort of Edison and Alisson, he does have that level of composure that you really need to be in that system, because Norwich, as we all know, like to draw the press and like to be patient until they provoke the opposition into leaving space behind them. And if Gunn was too fretful on the ball and didn't wait, then obviously that whole system would come apart. So credit where obviously is very due to Angus Gunn, and you'd be very surprised if he gets dropped between now and the end of the season, obviously injury barring. So I've gone for Gunn in goal, Jack Stacey at right back, who had another fantastic game against Rotherham and will probably be required to be a little bit more physical in this Stoke game. I think the stereotype at this moment in time under Michael Schumacher sort of holds up. They like long balls, they're very physical, and that battle is something that's obviously going to come to the fullbacks. We've seen very often, especially when Max Aarons was at the club, that that's an area where clubs like to, or teams like to play long balls in there, and I think that's probably a benefit of these two fullbacks. Will come on to Sam McCallum, but aerially they are pretty good, and you do wonder whether that will frustrate Stacey's ability to drive forward a little bit. Of course, he has been vital in the recent games and in the way that Norwich have improved their proactivity and the amount of possession that they have and the dangerous nature of their possession. And with that being something Norwich definitely need to assert more away from home, you hope from a Norwich perspective that Stoke's sort of long balls into those areas won't pin him back and won't force him into that area. And that's another area where Norwich probably will benefit if they are able to grapple possession away from Stoke and are able to control the game. And if they do, then you'd say Stacey will have a key role in it, as he did against Rotherham. He's been fantastic in the last few months, and hopefully he can continue that into the run-in. At centre-back, I've gone for Sorensen and Gibson, and of course there was a decision to make. I think part of the Hanley decision for Rotherham was the fact that he hasn't played 3 games in a week since that Achilles injury. Of course, he came off in the Middlesbrough game with a little bit of an issue, but had recovered in time to be on the bench for Rotherham, which would suggest that he would be able to start for this one. And with the physicality that I previously mentioned, that will certainly be an option in David Wagner's mind. But I just think with how important the distribution and the in-possession characteristics have been for him this season. You look at Danny Bart, who's a really experienced defender, was in the Championship team of the season last season and has barely got a look in. And you feel that that has a lot to do with sort of his ability in possession. I think he really struggled to open out and play the ball out to the fullbacks. Last week, he showed that he's maybe a little bit fretful in doing that and likes to pass to the left, when actually you can tell Wagner wants to open up the pitch, and with those fullbacks as high up the pitch as they are, those passes need to be assured and they need to be available. So I think you can tell from that how important the distribution is to Wagner. I think it will be a close decision, and with how conservative he's been at times away from home this season. I think Hanley is definitely an option and it is a close call, but just based on both the importance of controlling the ball as a centre-back for Wagner, and also Sorensen's performance against Rotherham, of course, got a goal and an assist and defensively looked pretty solid as well. I'm just slightly erring on the side of him for this one. At left centre-back, I've gone for Ben Gibson, who, of course, came off a centre-back, came off a half-time, in that Rotherham game, and you felt that was a bit of a precaution. Norwich were obviously 4-0 up, and I think Wagner spoke about the fact that obviously that allowed them to then make changes. We know how important he is, so if he's recovered without another left-footed centre-back in the sort of senior ranks, you'd be very surprised if he isn't in that team, both offensively and defensively. He's been very good in the last couple of months. So, yeah, for the reasons I spoke about, at right centre-back, you can tell how important he is to this system, and I'd be very, very surprised if he's dropped for this one. At left-back, Sam McCallum, of course, that news broke in the week that Younulis is set to be out for weeks, and provide an opportunity, actually, for Sam McCallum, who I think absolutely deserves it. Everyone who watches this regularly will know how often I talk about the fact that I think he's deserved more opportunity than maybe he's been given, and I think this is a sort of game where he could thrive. He has that added physicality that maybe Younulis doesn't have, and I think technically he's very, very close to where Younulis is as well. So with that physicality, that ability to win aerial balls, probably a slight increase in defensive solidity, even if he's not maybe quite where Wagner would like to be, sort of when Norwich are penned back. You combine that with the athleticism, with the quality of the ball in, and you feel that away from home at Stoke in those sort of typical conditions, that this could be a game that he really thrives in, and I think he deserves this opportunity. And I think obviously he's now got the contract up in the summer, and this next few weeks could well decide whether he gets one by then. So yeah, a big one for Sam McCallum, as probably the next few weeks will be, but I think Norwich fans have had all the evidence they need this season that they can trust him at left back. So I've gone for him in there. In the centre of midfield, Kenny McLean and Marcelino Nunez, and we'll come on to why I've put Gabriel Sara in that sort of number 10 position shortly. But just to speak about Marcelino Nunez and the way that he's forced himself into that system, they look a completely different side when he's not in there. And you look at that compared to the start of the season when they were pushing for almost the top two and they were really surprising everyone and he wasn't even really involved. Then they have that difficult period and they need somebody to come in and bring a little bit of control, help them be more proactive and better in possession. Marcelino Nunez is that man, buzzing around, increasing the tempo of the play. And I just think the way that they've looked without him, it's hard to not accommodate him somewhere in the team. Wagner's praised him a lot. He's talked about him as one of the first names on the team sheet. I think that was after Blackburn. So if that is the case, and obviously he was in the team against Rotherham, you'd be surprised if there isn't room made for him in this one. Kenny McLean alongside him, of course. I mean, we talked about Nunez as one of the first names on the team sheet. If he's one of, then Kenny McLean absolutely is the first name on the team sheet. We know how much Wagner liked him. We know how good of a season he's had. And although he was slightly sloppy in that Rotherham game, I think, maybe in possession he struggled to show the consistency that he maybe has throughout this season. You'd think that in a game that's likely to be tighter, where he maybe will have a little bit less time, that might even concentrate him and maybe iron out those errors. Of course, there is the evidence of the whole of his Norwich City career, which suggests that he doesn't really get into too long periods of bad form, and you'd expect him to come out of that one, which wasn't disastrous at all, but maybe wasn't the same high standards that he's been hitting this season. So, of course, we're expecting him to be in the team. On the right, I've gone for Christian Fastnacht, and there was obviously this debate about whether Sara would end up over on the right because Barnes and Sargent stayed through the middle and Sara was accommodated on the right instead of Fastnacht against Rotherham, so that, well, you'd think chiefly so that Nunez could be in the team, but also it allowed Norwich a few more players of that sort of creative mould to break down a Rotherham defence that wanted to sit deep and frustrate them. This Stoke one feels like it's going to be a different test, and although I have spoken obviously quite a lot already in this video about how Norwich need to be progressive and they need to go and dominate the game and they need to control possession away from home more than they have, and to give them their credit, they did that in the first half an hour. At Middlesbrough, I think Wagner has already sort of shown his hand in terms of how he approaches away fixtures. I think Stoke away is slightly different to maybe Middlesbrough away, because they won their last game 2-1 against Preston. They have been fairly impressive in the last couple of weeks. They are still in that sort of bunch of championship teams that feels like they're struggling at the moment, but you get the sense they're going in the right direction. They'll have their fans behind them for the first time in a long while, you'd suggest, and they have that confidence that maybe teams like Middlesbrough and Rotherham won't have had. So although it is almost a guessing game as to Wagner's thinking, I think there is an increased possibility, especially compared to how they went against Rotherham, that he does go a little bit more cautious. And not only is Sarah obviously a more solid defensive option in that number 10 position than Ashley Barnes, but also Fasnacht as a right winger is somebody he really trusts tactically and defensively, and you can tell the football intelligence he has, even if maybe he doesn't look sometimes like the most offensive winger. So although again I think that's a close one, and he'll look at these games, and I know Norwich are trying to be more proactive away from home, and he maybe will be tempted into doing what he did against Rotherham. It feels like the surroundings are quite different to that game, and I'm just about saying that I think he'll go for Fasnacht on the right, but I wouldn't be surprised to see Sarah on the right again and Barnes in the middle. But as I mentioned, Sarah through the middle behind Josh Sargent, and I spoke about this a couple of weeks ago actually, that having Sarah in there does allow you to have somebody a bit closer to Sargent who can maybe play those through balls and can find him in behind a little bit more. So those are the advantages. Of course, he looked very, very good in that advanced sort of inside right position against Rotherham as well. So if they can get the same player there that they did against Rotherham, and obviously it's a slightly different task, a more difficult task, and in a different position, so there's a lot of ifs, but if they can do that, then we all know how devastating that could be. So I've got him in that number 10 position. Borja Sainz on the left, scored a fantastic goal against Rotherham, obviously, and you'd like to see him now sort of pick up the form that he showed earlier in the season, maybe, or sort of around the winter period, where he was just taking games by the scruff of the neck, scoring fantastic goals, and hopefully continue that momentum into this one. Obviously, unfortunate with the red card, which was overturned by the FA, and you'd be very, very surprised if it's not him out there. On the left, up front, Josh Sargent, and we've already talked about two players as being two of the first names on the team sheet. For me, Sargent would be the absolute first one on there, maybe aside from Angus Gunn, but he'd be the first outfield player on there, because Norwich look a completely different side with and without him, and all the superlatives have already been used, all the tactical analysis has already been done. You know how fantastic Josh Sargent is, and if he can carry that on against Stoke, there's a good chance he scores, and there's a good chance Norwich get another valuable 3 points on the board. Of course, they have still struggled to end that away hoodoo, but they have a decent chance to do this against a team that is improving their form but has struggled in recent months, and David Wagner will hope that they can start this run in now, this defence of their top 6 position, with what would be another very important win. Of course, we'll have every kick covered across Pinkun channels. Go to pinkun.com/subscribe if you haven't already, and I think if you go to the top of any of our social media feeds, you should be able to find our WhatsApp pin, so you get all the Norwich City updates direct to your phone. Thank you for joining me on Tactics Board, and I'll see you very soon, hopefully after 3 points in the Potteries.